Hey everyone, Erick Stakelbeck here. Today on the Newscast, a new U.S. president has been sworn in. What will the Biden administration mean for the Middle East, for global security, and for you? Will this be a return to the Obama years? Get my take coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. I just returned from Washington, D.C. I was there for TBN covering the inauguration of Joe Biden. Now, I got a lot of feedback yesterday on social media. I posted a picture of myself in that correspondent role at the Capitol covering the event. People said, "Why on earth are you there?" And I get it. But folks, this was a major news event. Like it or not, whether you agree with the result or not, it was a major news event, and I think it's very important that we were able to cover it from a Christian perspective. Real news from a Christian perspective. I was joined by top leaders, top evangelical leaders like Governor Mike Huckabee, Franklin Graham, and we did not mince words about what we disagreed with when it comes to this incoming administration. And when it comes to our wheelhouse here on the Watchman Newscast, unfortunately, as of now, there's a lot to disagree with. I'm talking Israel, Iran, and this incoming administration's whole approach. Now, we got to give them a chance. They've been in office for 48 hours, but the early signals are troubling. And in talking to my contacts in Israel and in the Sunni Arab world, they are very concerned that this will be a return to the Obama years when it comes to Middle East policy and foreign policy. I'll tell you why in a minute. Before I get into it, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We're bringing you the kind of cutting-edge, timely information that you just won't hear anywhere else, now more than ever, certainly not in the mainstream media. If the past 48 hours and the first White House press conference were any indication, the mainstream media, which was so rough on the Trump administration, that's putting it kindly, over the past 4 years, has suddenly become very warm, fuzzy, and friendly with a Biden administration in office. Thankfully, here at the Watchman, we will not mince words. If we disagree with something this administration is doing, guess what? We're going to tell you about it. We will not hold our peace. So let's get into it. Middle East policy for this new administration got off to a bit of a bumpy start yesterday, January 20th. Right away, Joe Biden had barely been sworn in, where news emerged that on the official Twitter account of the U.S. ambassador to Israel, it was no longer called the Twitter account of the U.S. ambassador to Israel. It was suddenly the U.S. ambassador to Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Interesting how that happened day of the inauguration. Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. In other words, folks, thinking about the West Bank in particular, which we call Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel, where a good chunk of your Old Testament, the pre-Davidic period, unfolded in that region, Judea and Samaria. Not only great historical, spiritual, and biblical significance for Israel and the Jewish people, but security significance. Judea, Samaria, what the world calls the West Bank, is a major buffer between Israel and its enemies. All that said, is a Biden administration saying, with this subtle, you would think it's almost insignificant, hey, they changed the name of a Twitter handle, big deal. But in today's climate, it is a very big deal. And that was very telling. And it was the official account of the incoming ambassador. We don't know who that will be yet. David Friedman, one of the greats, a good friend of our show here at The Watchman, is leaving that post, sadly. One of the greatest U.S. ambassadors to Israel that there has been, bar none in my view. You've seen him many times here on the Watchman show. But to me, that was very telling, that subtle little tweak right away on day one to the account. And other people noticed as well. Senator Rick Scott of Florida, Congressman Mike McCall of Texas had some very strong words about it. It was noticed on Twitter. Now, why would a Biden administration do this? And before I go further, just so you know, It magically changed back, did the account, just a short time after people in the media in Congress called them out. It changed back to the U.S. ambassador to Israel. The West Bank Gaza part was dropped. All of a sudden, once the uproar ensued, the original Twitter name was back. Very interesting. Why would a Biden administration do this? Well, are they saying to us that they do not consider Judea and Samaria to be part of Israel? To them, is that exclusively Palestinian territory, the West Bank, as they call it? That remains to be seen. We know that an Obama administration pretty much had this view and wanted Israel to move back to the pre-1967 borders, which were the borders of Israel before the Six-Day War in 1967. Now, those have been called completely indefensible borders, not only by me, but by Israelis and top Israeli officials and by Trump administration officials. Those pre-1967 borders, folks, Israel's a tiny country as it is, right? It's the size of the state of New Jersey. If you take those borders in to the pre-1967 lines, you've got a big problem. And there's a concern that there was perhaps a message being sent with that subtle little Twitter tweak yesterday by the incoming administration. That remains to be seen, but get ready for some real wrangling over so-called Israeli settlements in Judea and Samaria over the next 4 years. Number two, Iran. The Biden administration has made very clear, or at least Joe Biden has made very clear, he is seeking to re-enter that disastrous Iran nuclear deal. It's pretty obvious. To me, these will be the two big issues, by the way. Iran in 2021, when it comes to the Middle East, Iran's nuclear program and the U.S. desire to re-enter that Iran nuclear deal, and also the settlement issue. Those will be the top two issues, just as they were under the Obama administration. No coincidence, obviously, Joe Biden served as vice president under Barack Obama, and major figures in this incoming administration also served in the Obama administration, and we have some of the architects of that disastrous Iran nuclear deal now working in a Biden administration. So you can certainly expect a very similar tone and strategic outlook from Joe Biden and his team when it comes to the Middle East. They want to re-enter the Iran nuclear deal. Folks, that's a disaster on many levels. It's a deal that never should have been signed. Just a reminder, President Trump pulled out of it, thankfully, in May 2018. One of my major issues, of the many issues I have with it, is that Iran's ballistic missile program and its support for terror throughout the region were not even mentioned in that nuclear deal, which, by the way, they've been breaking on a regular basis, as we've been documenting for you here on the Watchman Newscast. Now, Biden administration officials so far have said, hey, wait a minute, we're going to take our time. We're in no rush to re-enter that deal. But folks, make no mistake about it, they fully intend to re-enter that Iran deal. They'll be back in there with Britain, France, Germany, China, and Russia, and Iran will be laughing all the way to the bank as sanctions are lifted. They get billions of dollars, does the Iranian regime, in sanctions relief. And guess what, folks? They don't use those billions to build schools and playgrounds in Tehran. They use that money to supply to their various proxies around the region, whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, etc., etc. That money, a good chunk of it, goes to them to destroy schools and playgrounds in Israel and to murder U.S. soldiers in Iraq and in the region. That's how this works. And now we've been documenting this again. Check out our archives for the past month or so right here on the Newscast at YouTube. We've been documenting Iran's moves in the region. They're sending message after message to Israel and the United States that they're itching for a fight. They've been talking, obviously, about revenge for the deaths of Qasem Soleimani, the terror kingpin, and Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the father of Iran's nuclear bomb. Iran's been making noise about this for a month and a half now. They want revenge. Israel and the U.S. say don't even think about it, but Iran seems to be itching for a fight, judging by the series of major military drills they have carried out over the past few weeks. So what you have now, I fear, coming, or I'm concerned about, I should say, is almost a blackmail type situation, where Iran says to the United States and the powers in that Iran nuclear deal, if you don't do what we want, if you don't come back to the table, re-enter this deal, United States, and not only re-enter it, but give us everything we want, make it a very sweet deal for Iran. If you don't do that, we're going to stir things up in the Middle East. We can't predict what we'll do if you don't come back to the table and give us what we want. Essentially, Iran is the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people. The Iranian regime is blackmailing the United States. They've done it to Europe, and they'd like to do it to the United States. They did it pretty effectively to the Obama administration. The Trump administration, to me, as an Iran watcher, was a breath of fresh air, a much-needed breath of fresh air and accountability. My concern is that that is going to turn around, and I'm concerned about these early days for the Biden administration. Number one, you could have Iran say, okay, we're going to play it cool and be on our best behavior with the new administration. But on the other hand, Iran could say, you know what, we're going to stir things up and scare the United States back to the negotiating table. So it will be interesting to see what tack Iran takes, what strategy they employ over the next few weeks and months. I can tell you the Middle East, I don't need to tell you if you've been watching the newscast. We've been documenting this practically on a daily basis. The Middle East is a tinderbox right now. So this new administration in the U.S. has a lot of pressure on it. Another big issue that I'm looking at is Turkey. President Erdogan. How will that relationship be? Will the Biden administration hold Turkey accountable? Because as we've told you here in the newscast, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, has been also looking for a fight over the past few months, really over the past decade. And will a Biden administration be tough with Erdogan? Again, Turkey, a NATO member. I would have liked to have seen the Trump administration, quite frankly, be tougher with Erdogan. That was one area of the Middle East policy of the previous administration where I said, hey, we need to hold Erdogan accountable. Again, Turkey, under Erdogan at least, not NATO, but NINO, folks. NATO in name only. Will he push the envelope as well? That's the big question. With a new administration coming in here in the United States, the leader of the free world, we set the tone, right? With a new administration coming in that, look, is not exactly looked at as a hawkish administration, which harkens back to the Obama years, will all of the bad guys be pushing the envelope now and testing the waters? We talked about Iran. Of course, when you talk about Iran, you've got Iran's proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and all the rest. Turkey, Erdogan, causing big trouble in the region now. What about Russia, China, North Korea? Three other nations I think about that have not been productive players on the world stage, let's just say. How about Sunni terror? We haven't heard much from ISIS and Al-QAEDA in the past 4 years, right? President Trump kept his word. He crushed that ISIS caliphate. Al-QAEDA's been down, but now we've heard recently, we reported it here on the newscast, that Sunni Al-QAEDA has found safe haven and a home in Iran. Yes, Shia and Sunni can work together when they have some similar goals, which include anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-Western ideology. So Al-QAEDA and Iran, it sounds crazy on its surface, I know, and they've fought each other in other areas throughout the region. Well, they can also cooperate when the time is right and when the target is right. So will Sunni terror rear its head again as well? Folks, again, I'm praying that none of this happens. We're called to pray for our leaders for wisdom, discernment, clarity, strength, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Regardless of whether I agreed with the result or not, that's exactly what I am doing. So let's hope for the best for the incoming Biden administration. Not incoming, they're in. They have been sworn in. We will keep a very close eye on this in the days, the weeks, the months, and yes, the years to come. Lots going on in the most volatile region and most strategic region in the world, the Middle East. So keep it right here on the Watchman Newscast. Subscribe here on YouTube. Click the notification bell. Check out our Watchman weekly TV show on TBN. New time slot, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday nights. And you can catch full episodes, of course, right here on YouTube. Thanks for joining us today here on The Watchman. God bless you. Hang in there. And remember, never hold your peace.